Hey Tigers, welcome to your digital reteach for physical change versus chemical change as it occurs in the digestive system. Now this is just one of those teaks that, I hate to say it, it's going to take some memorization. There's not a super amount of tricks here that you can do. This isn't even something that has to be applied that much. This is just sometimes where you're just going to have to make sure you really understand physical change and chemical change. Even though this reteach is short, I strongly recommend going through it a couple of times. Maybe make some sort of flashcards, looking on the internet for more examples. This is one of those things that's just so simple that it's hard to make it anything more than it is. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to look for is how do I get credit for this reteach? And that's pretty important to you. First thing is your teacher probably gave you a worksheet that's kind of a guided note sheet. Make sure you're taking notes while this video plays. Follow the instructions in the video. If the video is asking you to write something down or work out an example, that is expected to be on your notes. Listen and look for all directions. When finished, show your notes to your teacher. Only your teacher can give you credit. Once you have credit for this reteach, your teacher will tell you how to do the reassessment. Alright, so before we begin, the last little clue I can give you is if the video is moving too fast, make sure you're pausing it, slowing it down, doing whatever you need to do to get the help that you need. The nice part about the online video is you can go over this as many times as you need to until you feel more comfortable with this topic. So let's look at our note sheet and let's start on the basics section. For the basics, let's go back to a physical change. Now you've been doing physical changes since elementary school. It's no secret here, this isn't a challenge, but it can get a little difficult to understand sometimes what is physical change and what's not. It's examples we give you that are sometimes concerning. But basically, a physical change is if you take an object and you're just changing maybe the size of it, you're changing the shape of it, you're changing the form of it, or you could even be changing the state of matter. And what I mean by state of matter is take a glass of water. Inside the water is H2O. Now you'll get into that in a whole lot more details in 8th grade. But for now, we just know that H2O is some hydrogen atoms and some oxygen atoms. Now we don't need to know the details of how they're arranged and all that. We just know it's hydrogen and oxygen. Now if you take that same glass of water at room temperature, leave it in the freezer overnight, it turns into ice. So a lot of students get confused and wonder, how is this still just a physical change? Well, basically, you haven't changed the hydrogen and the oxygen. They're just more tightly packed together and their state of matter has changed from a liquid to a solid. So going from a liquid to a solid is just a physical change. The most important thing is we're not altering the matter's identity. So if we would have changed it from hydrogen to oxygen to something else, and if it wasn't H2O anymore, then maybe we could have called it a chemical change. We'll get to that in a little bit. So that's it for the basics of a physical change. Now for a chemical change, here's the definition that we took right out of the textbook for you. Now a chemical change you do not have that much experience with. Most elementary school teachers never would have taught this, nor should they have. The first time you would have ever seen anything for a chemical change should have been last year in 6th grade. So this is still pretty new to you. And in 8th grade, they're going to add on a ton of details. So for now, we need just enough to get us by for this unit. So when we think about an object, we'll say a chemical change is a change in which the substances that make up the matter change into other substances. And those other substances now have different chemical and physical properties. Think about if you leave a bike outside, and if you notice months later, there's rust on the bike. That rust is a new substance. Now, it's made from the substances that were already there. It's made from the air, it's made from the water, it's made from the metal. But it's taken those atoms and it's rearranged them so that we now have rust, which has totally different chemical and physical properties than what used to be on your bicycle. That would be an example of a chemical change. If we're actually changing the molecules, if we're actually changing the atoms, that's what we're looking for. And once again, that'll make a lot more sense in 8th grade. We're just not quite there yet in 7th grade. So if you're on the back of your notes in the details section, right, in the details section, we're going to ask you to try to figure out a couple examples. So in this example number 1, it says the stomach churns and mixes food. Go ahead and write that sentence down. The stomach churns and mixes food right next to example 1. Pause the video if you need more time. Now after you've written that down, your next job is to answer that. And we want to think about, would that be a physical change to the food that's in your stomach? Or would that be a chemical change? And you need to write down physical or chemical. And if possible, try to give it a little reason why. All right, pause the video and then I can try to give you a little help for this first couple one. All right, on this one, you should have come up with the idea that this was a physical change. The key here is the stomach is churning your food. Churning is kind of like mixing it up. It's kind of just moving it around. So the churning and mixing is just that. It's just moving the food. The molecules and the atoms in the food are unchanged by this. Now, they're changed by other things, but we're not worried about that. On this example, it's just a physical change. And that'll be our first example. All right, let's go to example 2. Go ahead and write down teeth tear food. So your teeth are tearing food. All right, same thing as before. Let's figure out if this is a physical change or a chemical change and back it up with a reason. Go ahead and pause the video, write down your answer, and we'll see how close you get. Okay, for teeth that are actually tearing the food, this is simply a physical change. Say if your teeth just cut into a sandwich and they ripped a sandwich in half. You have 2 halves of the sandwich. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, didn't we change the sandwich? No, we just changed its size. The atoms of all the food that are in that sandwich are still the same. We just now have 2 pieces. We physically have changed the food, whatever the food may be. At this point, once again, for the teeth action, we haven't done anything chemical. This is all physical at this moment. Go ahead and go to number 3. For example number 3, stomach acid changes food into nutrients. So go ahead and write down that sentence and pause. All right, next up, let's try to figure out what in the world is this. Is this a physical change or a chemical change? Go ahead and write down your answer, back it up with a reason why you think so, and then unpause the video and we'll see if you get it right. On example 3, you should have come up with the answer that this is a chemical change. All right, so this is our first chemical change example. So what gives it away? The big giveaway for me in this one is the fact that we had acid that changes the food from food into something else. It changed it into nutrients. So basically the acid has started to pull the nutrients not only out of the food, but it's starting to change the food into the nutrients. It's starting to unlock that. It's rearranging the atoms in the food into what we would now call nutrients. And those nutrients have different properties than the food itself. So that's going to be a good signal that we're looking at a chemical change here. We've gone way past physically changing it at this point. For example number 4, your large intestine absorbs water from waste. All right, go ahead and pause, write down the sentence, and then while it's also paused, write down where you think it's physical or chemical and back it up with a reason. All right, for this one, hopefully you just got that it was a physical change. All we're doing is absorbing water. And think of that like if you dump a glass of water onto a towel and the towel absorbs the water. Even though the towel now is damp, the water is just inside the towel. It's inside the fibers of the towel. It's still H2O. So this large intestine that's absorbing water from waste, if it's pulling water out of the waste or if it's moving things around, it's kind of like a mixture. It's kind of like a salad. If I have a green leaf lettuce and a red leaf lettuce and some tomatoes, I can mix them up all I want. I haven't chemically changed anything. They're still their own components. Here it's waste, here it's water. We can move the water around. It's still waste, it's still water. We haven't made a new substance with a new property and arranged atoms at this point. Got to be a physical change. For number 5, this will be our last one. Bile breaks down lipids. Go ahead and pause the video, write down this sentence, and then write down where you think it's chemical or physical and back it up with a reason why. All right, now an example like this is often where the vocabulary can stop the students. Don't let this happen. A lot of these words really don't belong in 7th grade. A lot of these words are more specifically high school. Like lipids, you won't specifically study lipids until high school. Now, most of your 7th grade teachers are going to try to sneak that in when they can, and that's smart. That way you get exposed to it now, and it kind of fits in the unit that they're doing. Same thing for bile. You know, we might want details about this, but don't let this slow you down. What we basically know is something is breaking down into something else. We can leave it at that if we need to. So if we're breaking something down into something else, this something else has new properties. whatever bile and lipids is, even if you don't know all those details, that's okay. We should understand that it's going to be two different things with two different properties. And as soon as we start thinking like that, two different things with two different properties, we immediately know that we have to be looking at a chemical change, because a chemical change is going to give you new properties on that new substance. All right, Tigers, that was it for the digital reteach. Hope it helped. Now go ahead and take that note sheet, take that back to your teacher the next time you see them, and politely ask them what's the next step that you need to do to get your next reassessment. Best of luck.